Imagine for a second that we've cracked the code on time travel.
Okay, I'm with you.
We aren't just reading a textbook today. We are physically setting the dial for the summer of 1929.
Hmm.
You step out of the machine and onto the pavement in New York City, and the first thing that hits you is the heat. It's humid, sticky,
Yeah.
but there's an energy underneath it that, it vibrates right through the soles of your shoes. It feels electric.
It's a total sensory overload.
Yeah.
You're hearing the honking of those new Ford Model Ts, the sound of construction on skyscrapers, and jazz is just spilling out of open windows.
And let's place you specifically in the financial district, Wall Street.
Okay.
Right. Now, in this scenario, you aren't a tycoon. You aren't wearing a top hat. You're a teenager. Let's say you're a shoeshine boy.
Okay.
You're down on your knees, buffing the wingtips of bankers and executives. And usually you'd expect to hear these guys talking about, I don't know, baseball or the weather,
Sure.
but that's not what you're hearing.
No, not in the summer of 29. The conversation is singular. It's all about stocks.
And here's the truly strange part. It's not just the guy in the expensive suit talking about it. The taxi driver dropping him off is shouting stock tips out the window. The barber down the street is leveraging his earnings to buy shares.
And you, the shoeshine boy, you've got a few dollars in the game too.
It feels like a party that is physically incapable of ending. Everyone is winning. Everyone is getting rich.
It has to have felt unstoppable.
But then we have to hit the fast forward button, just a tiny bit. 3-4 months, it's late October now. You're on that same corner.
And the atmosphere has completely inverted. The cheering is gone. The shouting on the trading floor has turned into this low, terrified murmur. You can hear the ticker tape machines, these little glass-domed telegraphs, printing out prices, just clicking furiously, but they're lagging behind. They can't keep up with how fast the numbers are dropping.
The lights have been turned off. The music stopped. And North America is about to wake up with a hangover that lasts for 10 years.
And that is the stage for today's deep dive. We are looking at perhaps the most dramatic psychological and economic U-turn in modern history. The roller coaster ride from the Roaring Twenties to the Great Depression.
Our mission today is to figure out the how and the why. How did we go from the biggest economic party in history to a total collapse? And we aren't just talking about the U.S.
Right.
We're looking at the Canadian experience, too, because that border did not stop the economic contagion.
Not at all. We've got a lot of ground to cover. We need to unpack the culture of the 20s, the mechanics of the crash, because it really is a mechanism.
It is.
The deep systemic rot that caused the Depression, and then how governments on both sides of the border scrambled to try and fix it.
So let's start with the high, the party. The Roaring Twenties, we call it roaring, and sure, that implies noise, but statistically, what did that roar actually look like?
It looked like an explosion of wealth.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to put this in context. World War I is over. Europe is completely devastated, but North America, especially the US and Canada to an extent, comes out as the factory for the world. Okay.
So between 1920 and 1929, the nation's wealth in the US actually doubled.
Doubled in a decade. That's staggering. I mean, that isn't gradual growth. That is a rocket ship.
It is. And for the first time in American history, the census showed that more Americans lived in cities than on farms. This is the Great Urbanization.
Right.
People were leaving the land and moving to where the factory jobs were. And when you pack that many people together with a little bit of disposable income, you get the birth of mass culture.
And this is such a crucial concept for understanding the modern world, isn't it? Before this, if you lived in, say, rural Saskatchewan versus downtown Chicago, you were basically living on different planets.
Totally different worlds. But in the 20s, you start seeing this homogenization. Everyone is buying the same goods at the new chain stores. Everyone is using the same slang.
And crucially,
everyone is listening to the same music. And this brings us to what you could call the technology of happiness. The toys of the 20s.
We absolutely cannot talk about the 20s without the machine that literally redrew the map, the automobile, Henry Ford's Model T. I mean, before Ford, a car was a luxury item, like owning a private jet today. Ford didn't just invent a car, he perfected the assembly line.
Right.
And he drove the cost down so low that a regular person, a factory worker, could actually buy one.
And that changes the geography of living. It's not just a vehicle, it's the engine of the suburbs.
Exactly.
You didn't have to live in the smoke of the factory anymore. You could drive to work. It represented freedom.
And people bought them in droves. By 1924, Ford had produced over 10 million of them. And while the car was changing the landscape, the radio was changing the headspace.
The radio is basically the internet of the 1920s.
In terms of its impact, 100%. Between 1923 and 1930, 60% of American families bought one.
Wow.
So suddenly, you have news, sports, and jazz music beaming right into the living room. It synchronized the country. If a big event happened, everyone heard about it at the same time.
And inside the home, there was another revolution happening, the rise of electric servants.
I love that term. It's so retro-futuristic. They just meant washing machines, vacuums, refrigerators.
Right.
But for women, this wasn't just about convenience, it was liberation. It drastically reduced the hours of household drudgery. It created this new, elusive commodity called free time.
And women were doing a lot with that free time. I mean, the 20s was a massive social revolution. We have to talk about the flapper.
The flapper is the absolute icon of the era. But we have to look past the cartoon image. Yes, they had bobbed hair and short skirts, which was incredibly scandalous for the time, but it was a political statement.
It was a rejection of Victorian values.
Completely. The 19th Amendment had just passed in 1920, giving women the right to vote in the U.S. Women were entering the workforce in white-collar jobs. They had more access to birth control.
So the flapper smoking a cigarette and dancing the Charleston wasn't just partying.
No, she was asserting her independence.
And the soundtrack to that independence was jazz.
The Jazz Age. And this is tied so deeply to the Harlem Renaissance, which was this explosion of African-American art and culture. You have legends like Louis Armstrong and Langston Hughes.
And white youth were just consuming this culture voraciously. They were dancing the Charleston and the Black Bottom. The older generation looked at this mixing of races and rhythms and thought society was collapsing.
They were horrified.
And the irony is, while everyone is out at these nightclubs drinking and dancing, they are technically criminals. We have to mention Prohibition.
The 18th Amendment. It banned the production and sale of alcohol. The moral crusaders who pushed for it thought it would, clean up society.
It did the exact opposite.
The complete opposite. It handed a monopoly on a very, very popular product to organized crime.
Which created the speakeasy culture.
Yep. Illegal bars. And to supply those bars, you needed sophisticated logistics. Enter the gangster. Al Capone in Chicago was making an estimated $100 million a year in 1920s money from bootlegging. Prohibition basically taught a whole generation that it's cool to break the law.
So you have a culture that is breaking rules, making money, and obsessing over the new. And that bleeds right into the economy. The mindset shifted from buy what you need to buy what you want.
Consumerism. And the lubricant for all that consumerism is credit. The idea of buy now, pay later. Installment plans became a way of life.
Which the government was totally fine with.
They encouraged it. The political philosophy of the day was laissez-faire.
Okay, for the students listening, let's really pin that term down. Laissez-faire.
It's French for let do or let it be.
Yeah.
In an economic context, it means the government keeps its hands off. Low taxes, very little regulation.
So presidents like Harding and Coolidge?
They believed, quite famously, that the business of America is business. They slashed taxes on the wealthy and basically let the market run wild.
And run wild it did. Which brings us to part 2 of our story. If the 20s was the party, the stock market was the drug of choice. We call it the bubble.
Or the mania. Historically, the stock market was this, exclusive club for gentlemen in top hats, bankers, tycoons. The average person didn't own stocks.
Right.
But in the 20s, a man named Charles Mitchell changed all that.
Yeah.
He was the head of National City Bank.
He's like the villain in a movie who doesn't realize he's the villain.
Well, he had what he thought was a brilliant idea. He saw that regular people had bought war bonds during World War I. So he thought, why not sell them stocks?
So he's marketing stocks to the masses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He set up brokerage offices on main streets across the country. He made it seem safe, respectable. Suddenly, cooks, taxi drivers, and our shoe shine boy were all trading.
But here's the mechanism that turned a popular trend into an absolute disaster. Most of these people didn't have the cash to buy stocks outright.
No.
So they used a technique called buying on margin.
This is the single most critical concept to understand about the crash. Buying on margin is just a fancy way of saying you're buying stock with borrowed money.
Okay, so let's actually break down the math here. Can we make it super simple for everyone listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine you want to buy one share of a company and it costs $100.
Okay, one share, $100.
But you only have $10 in your pocket.
Right. So normally that's it. Game over. Can't buy it.
Normally, yes. But with margin, you go to a broker. You give them your $10. The broker then lends you the other $90.
Whoa, so I'm just putting down 10% and he's covering the rest.
Exactly. Now, you own a $100 stock, but you've only risked $10 of your own cash.
So if the stock goes up.
That's where the magic happens. Imagine the stock price goes up to $150. You sell it. You pay back the broker his $90.
And I keep.
You keep your original $10 plus the $50 profit. You just turn $10 into $60. That is a 500% return.
That sounds incredible. Why wouldn't everyone do that?
Because leverage cuts both ways. What if the price drops? Say that $100 stock falls to $50. The broker gets nervous. He wants his loan back. This is called a margin call. He demands you pay the $90 immediately.
But I don't have it. I only ever had the $10 to begin with.
But he sells your stock, takes what he can get, and you still owe him the rest of the money. You are now in debt, and your initial investment is completely wiped out.
And the terrifying stat is just how widespread this was.
It was almost the entire market. By the late 20s, 90% of the purchase price of stocks was being made with borrowed money.
90%.
And 40 cents of every single dollar loaned by banks in the United States was going into the stock market. It was a house of cards built on debt.
But the allure was just irresistible. You had Groucho Marx, the most famous comedian in the world, investing his life savings.
He called it an easy racket. He was making thousands of dollars a day, on paper, of course. He'd be on a movie set, checking ticker prices between takes.
And Pat Bologna, the shoeshine boy we mentioned in the intro. That's a real guy.
It is. He was hearing tips from the bankers whose shoes he was shining. By the time he was 22, he had made a small fortune. Again, all on paper.
Or Alice Austin, the photographer.
Wait.
She actually mortgaged her house to buy stocks on margin. She bet her roof on the market because she wanted to travel.
Everyone was seeing green. But there were voices of reason. Paul Warburg, a really prominent banker, he warned in early 1929 that this orgy of speculation would lead to a depression.
And the reaction, how'd that go over?
They booed him off the stage. They called him a dinosaur, a party pooper. No one wants to hear the bad news when the party is this good.
But eventually, lights go out on their own. Part 3. The crash of 1929. The hangover.
The timeline here is really important because people often think it was just one bad day. It was more like a slow-motion car crash over a week.
Right.
It started on October 24th, 1929. That was Black Thursday.
The market takes a big dip. Panic starts to ripple through the system. But I read that the bankers actually tried to rig it back up.
They did. It's like a scene from a movie. Thomas Lamont of J.P. Morgan and other top bankers, they meet across the street from the exchange. They pool their millions and send a guy named Richard Whitney onto the trading floor.
Okay.
And he starts buying huge blocks of blue chip stocks, reliable companies like U.S. Steel at prices higher than the market value.
It was a show of force, a performance. Look, we're buying, everything is fine.
And it worked. For the weekend, anyway. The slide stopped. But fear is a contagion. Over that weekend, people went home, they talked to their neighbors, they read the papers.
And the brokers.
The broker sent out those margin calls. Pay up on Monday or we sell your stock for whatever we can get.
And then came Tuesday, October 29, Black Tuesday.
The dam just broke. Everyone tried to sell at once. There were no buyers. 16 million shares were traded in a single day, a record that stood for decades.
And this is where the technology, which felt so modern, completely failed them.
The ticker tape machines. They couldn't print the prices fast enough.
You were hours behind.
Hours. So imagine the terror. You're in a brokerage office in Chicago. The tape says your stock is at $50. You put in a sell order. But in reality, on the floor in New York, it had already crashed to $20 3 hours ago. You were flying completely blind.
And the wealth destruction was just instantaneous.
$25 billion in personal wealth evaporated in days. Groucho Marx lost everything. Alice Austin, the photographer, lost her home and ended up at a poorhouse.
And we have to address the dark mythology of Wall Street, the stories of suicides.
It's very grim image, right? Bankers jumping out of windows. And while the press did exaggerate the numbers, it did happen. This psychological shock was just profound. People who were masters of the universe on Monday were destitute by Wednesday.
Now, we need to make a very sharp distinction for everyone listening. The crash was obviously horrible, but was the crash itself the Great Depression?
No. And this is the most common mistake students make. The stock market crash was the trigger. It was the sparks that hit the dynamite. But the dynamite was already there, waiting. The Great Depression, that 10-year nightmare, was caused by deep systemic weaknesses in the economy that the crash just exposed.
So let's dismantle that dynamite. Part 4, the causes of the Great Depression. Why did a bad week on Wall Street turn into a bad decade for the entire world?
There isn't one single smoking gun. It's more like a combination of gears all grinding to a halt at the same time. The first gear was the banking system.
The banks were fragile.
Incredibly fragile.
Oh,
You have to remember, banks had loaned out their depositors' money, your grandma's life savings, to speculators buying stock on margin. When the market crashed, those speculators couldn't pay the loans back. The banks were left holding the bag.
And when the public realized this,
Panic. It leads to a bank run. You have to picture a crowd of hundreds of people pounding on the doors of their local bank, all demanding their cash at the same time.
but a bank doesn't keep everyone's cash in the vault, they lend most of it out.
Exactly. So when everyone demands it at once, the bank just collapses, it closes its doors.
And in 1929, there was no insurance.
Zero. If the bank locked its doors, your money was gone. It vaporized. Thousands of banks failed this way.
Okay, so that's cause number one. Cause number two, overproduction.
This goes back to that factory efficiency we talked about earlier. We just got too good at making things. Factories were churning out radios, cars, toasters. But wages for the workers making those things hadn't risen nearly as fast as productivity.
So the shelves are full, but people's pockets are basically empty.
You got it. Once everyone who could afford a Model T bought one, sales stopped. So the factory cuts production. That means firing workers. Now those workers have no money at all, so they buy even less stuff.
It's a death spiral.
It's a vicious cycle. And it leads to a weird economic term, deflation. We always hear about inflation prices going up, but here, prices were dropping.
And why is cheap stuff a problem? It sounds good.
It sounds great, right? Cheap bread. But for an economy, deflation is cancer. If prices are dropping, businesses can't make a profit, so they cut wages or fire more people. And if you, the consumer, think a car will be even cheaper next month, what do? You wait. You don't buy it today. Spending across the entire economy just freezes.
And then, as if things weren't bad enough, governments decided to make it a global fight with tariffs.
Protectionism. The U.S. government thought we need to protect American factories. So they passed things like the Fortney-McCumber tariff and later Smoot-Hawley, putting huge taxes on foreign goods.
But other countries didn't just take it.
No, of course not. They retaliated. Europe slapped huge taxes on American goods. Global trade just ground to a halt. So now American and Canadian companies couldn't even sell their surplus goods overseas. The market dried up everywhere.
And finally, as if the economic incompetence wasn't enough, nature decided to join the party. The Dust Bowl.
Ecological apocalypse. In the North American prairies, so the U.S. Midwest and the Canadian West farmers had been over-farming the land for years, stripping the topsoil, and then a massive multi-year drought hit.
The descriptions are just terrifying. Walls of black dust, thousands of feet high, blotting out the sun, literally burying farmhouses.
It completely destroyed the agricultural engine of the continent. Farmers couldn't grow crops, they couldn't pay their mortgages, and many simply abandoned their land. You had these waves of what were essentially climate refugees moving west, looking for work that just didn't exist.
So you have a broken banking system, silent factories, a global trade war, and the land itself is blowing away. That brings us to part 5, life during the Depression and the response.
The human cost is just hard to overstate. Unemployment hit 25%. 1 in 4 working-age people had no job. In the U.S., homeless people built these shanty towns out of scrap metal, cardboard, and crates in public parks. They called them Hoovervilles.
Named after President Herbert Hoover, that is a savage burn.
It really reflected the bitterness. Hoover was a big believer in rugged individualism. He thought the market would self-correct. He viewed government handouts as morally weakening. He famously kept saying, prosperity is just around the corner, while people were literally starving.
And we saw that same kind of dark humor up north in Canada.
We did. The Prime Minister was R.B. Bennett. He was a millionaire, very proper, and seemed very out of touch to ordinary people.
So Canadians who couldn't afford gasoline.
They took the engines out of their cars and hitched them to horses, and they called them Bennett buggies.
And if you were sleeping on a park bench under a newspaper,
that was a Bennett blanket.
So how did the political leadership try to dig out of this? In the U.S., Hoover was absolutely crushed in the 1932 election by Franklin D. Roosevelt.
FDR. And he was a seismic shift. He brought in the New Deal. This was really the death of laissez-faire in America. He basically said the government is now going to take responsibility for the economy.
He created what they called the alphabet agencies.
Dozens of them. The FDIC to ensure bank deposits, so the bank runs would stop. The SEC to regulate Wall Street, so the margin bubble couldn't happen again. The WPA to hire unemployed men to build bridges and roads.
He changed the psychology. He
Right.
famously told the country in his first speech, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself."
Now, you compare that to Canada. The response was, well, it was a lot slower.
You had Mackenzie King, the Liberal Prime Minister, at the start of it all.
King was very cautious. He initially thought the crash was just a temporary dip, and he made one of the worst political gaffes in Canadian history.
What'd he do?
He said in a speech that he wouldn't give a 5-cent piece to any province with a conservative government that asked for federal aid.
Wow. So he's alienating half the country during a national crisis? Bold strategy?
It cost him his job. He lost the 1930 election to R.B. Bennett. Now, to be fair, Bennett tried.
Yep.
He raised tariffs, which backfired, and he set up relief camps.
The work camps. This is a pretty dark chapter in Canadian history.
It really is. The government was terrified of young, unemployed men gathering and rioting in the cities. So they basically shipped them off to camps deep in the wilderness.
And what were they doing there?
They paid them 20 cents a day to build roads to nowhere and clear brush.
20 cents a day. That is basically slave wages.
It was insulting, and the conditions were grim. This pressure cooker eventually just exploded in 1935. Thousands of men walked out of the camps in British Columbia. They climbed on top of freight trains and started the On to Ottawa trek.
So they're going to take their grievances right to the Prime Minister's doorstep in Ottawa.
That was the plan, but they never made it. Bennett panicked. He ordered the trains stopped in Regina, Saskatchewan. And on July 1st, police charged a public meeting of the trekkers.
The Regina riot.
It was a full-on brawl. One police officer was killed. Hundreds were injured. It made Bennett look like a tyrant.
Bennett did try to pivot near the end of his term, right? He tried to copy FDR.
He did. In a desperate last-ditch move, he got on the radio and announced his own New Deal with unemployment insurance and minimum wages. But the voters saw it as a deathbed conversion. It was too little, too late. They voted him out and brought Mackenzie King back in.
This frustration with the main parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives, it actually changed the political map of Canada forever. We saw new parties rise from the dust.
When the mainstream fails, people look for alternatives. And that's when we saw the birth of the CCF, or the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation.
Led by Tommy Douglas.
A Baptist minister, of all things. They were socialists. Their Regina Manifesto was radical for the time. They wanted public ownership of utilities, massive job creation, and pensions. They argued that capitalism itself was broken.
And the CCF eventually evolved into the NDP, the new Democratic Party we have today.
That's right. And on the other side of the spectrum, in Alberta, you had the Social Credit Party.
Led by Bible Bill Everhart, another preacher.
You can't make this stuff up. Bible Bill.
So what was his idea?
He had a very strange theory that the Depression was caused simply by a lack of cash in circulation. So he promised every citizen in Alberta a social dividend, basically a check for $25 a month.
Which is a lot of money when you have zero.
It swept him into power. He never actually managed to implement it fully because the federal government blocked him, but it just shows how desperate people were for any new idea.
Before we wrap up, we have to zoom out. We've focused on North America, but this was a global infection.
And this is the scariest part. In Germany, the economic collapse was even more total. The U.S. called in its loans to Germany after the crash, and the German economy just imploded. The despair and humiliation there led people to lose faith in democracy entirely.
They were looking for a strong man, a savior.
And they found one in Adolf Hitler. The Nazi Party used the economic misery to gain traction. So you can draw a direct straight line from the margin calls on Wall Street in 1929 to the invasion of Poland and the start of World War II.
That is a heavy realization. The stock market isn't just about money, it's about global stability. So let's recap the journey we took today.
We started in the Roaring Twenties, a decade of technological leaps, mass culture, and an illusion of endless wealth that was fueled by easy credit.
We watched that bubble burst in October 1929, triggered by speculation and buying on margin, which wiped out billions in a matter of days.
And then we saw how that crash revealed the systemic rot, the weak banks, the overproduction, and the protectionist tariffs that plunged the world into the Great Depression.
And finally, we saw how it changed the role of government forever. We went from laissez-faire, hands-off policies to the modern era where the government is expected to provide a social safety net.
The big history lesson here. Economies are psychological. Greed and fear are two of the most powerful forces on Earth.
And financial bubbles tend to repeat themselves if we don't remember how the last one popped. All right, before we let you go, let's do a quick check your understanding. 3 questions to see if you were tuning in.
Question 1. In your own words, explain what buying on margin means and why it turned a market correction into a total market collapse.
Think about that lever, $10 controlling $100. Question 2, what was a Bennett buggy, and what does that object tell us about the relationship between Canadians and their government during the 30s?
And question 3, true or false? The stock market crash of 1929 was the sole cause of the Great Depression.
If you said true, you need to rewind to part 4. The crash was the trigger. The real causes were the banking failures, overproduction, and tariffs.
Always look for the dynamite, not just the match.
Thanks for diving in with us today. It's wild to think about how these events from almost a century ago, the radio, the car, bank insurance, still define the world we live in right now.
Absolutely. Keep asking questions and keep looking at the bigger picture.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.